The burned name. The flagged name.
2 weeks. 14 days of running freight that smelled like fertilizer and tasted like boredom. Greenfall to Soane Waypoint to Keter Free Ports, Keter back to Greenfall. A triangle of agricultural commerce that paid badly and threatened no one, which was exactly the point. The Cinder pulled left on the approach to Keter, the way she always pulled left, a gentle, persistent suggestion that we should be somewhere else, doing something else, flying in literally any other direction. I'd shimmed the control column twice since the Crucible job. The shims helped the way aspirin helps a broken leg. Course correction applied, Rosk said from the co-pilot's seat, adjusting for the drift with the mechanical patience of someone who had accepted this particular flaw the way you accept weather. She's got opinions today. The Cinder always has opinions. Today's opinion is that we should be 2 degrees starboard of our filed heading. I have overruled her. The water recycler made its noise, not the old noise. That unit had finally died during the Thresh Belt run, replaced at Pellin's anchorage with a refurbished model that Lynn Cortez had sourced from a decommissioned dressy cargo hauler. The new noise was different, quieter, more of a wheeze than a wail, repeating every 14 minutes with the reliability of a chronic cough. 14 minutes, I said, not looking at the clock. 13 minutes and 42 seconds. You are improving. I was about to say something about how a man shouldn't have to develop an internal timer calibrated to his own ship's respiratory complaints when the AM receiver clicked. The receiver was a modification that looked like it belonged on the Cinder, which is to say it looked jury-rigged, slightly crooked, and held in place by determination, and 2 strips of hull bonding tape. Lynn Cortez had mounted it herself during our stopover at Pellin's anchorage, wiring it into the console with the no-nonsense efficiency of an engineer who thought aesthetic considerations were a luxury for people with newer ships. It sat at 47, 3 megahertz, the old maritime distress band, too obsolete for the Combine's broadband jammers to target, too low-tech for modern scanners to flag, too forgotten for anyone to think about, except 37 engineers across 22 stations who had kits built from water pump motors and copper coil, and the stubborn memory of how things used to work. The click was followed by a burst, 40 seconds of encoded signal, compressed and transmitted according to Lynn's protocol. The receiver decoded it automatically, translating the signal into text that scrolled across a secondary display Rosk had wired into the console. I read it again. The cockpit suddenly felt smaller. Network alert priority source. LC home flagged. Martin Cade identity compromised Crucible platform. Active sweep initiated all nodes. Evaluate exposure. Reduce footprint. Freak will go silent. 48H standard protocol. End. Rosk. He was already reading it. His amber eyes moved across the text with the focused stillness of someone processing something they'd expected but hoped wouldn't happen. Martin Cade, he said. That's me. Was me. The cover identity Sierra's team built for the auction. I stared at the words on the screen. Identity compromised. 2 words that meant 100 things, none of them good. Someone flagged it. The Combine is sweeping the Crucible. Lynn's network is going silent. 48 tower protocol, no transmissions, no contact, minimal footprint. Standard procedure when a node is compromised. It's not a node that's compromised, Rosk. It's us. The water recycler wheezed. 14 minutes. The Cinder drifted 2 degrees left. Keter Free Ports hung in the viewport like a cluster of lights that had nothing to do with us anymore. Martin Cade was burned. That name, the fake registration, the forged financial credentials, the fictional Gantry Ridge Mining Cooperative, All of it was now a thread that someone was pulling, and threads connect to other things, to the Crucible, to the docking records that showed which arm we'd used, to the internal security footage that had recorded every corridor I'd walked, every room I'd entered, every conversation I'd had within range of a camera. To Neelat Singh, the mechanic who'd recognized my belt buckle and whispered 47-3 like a prayer. To the 40-second AM burst that had broadcast the entire auction catalog to anyone listening on the right frequency. If they've flagged the name, I said slowly, they'll run the security footage. Face recognition, cross-reference against known associates. Yes, and they'll find me, the real me. Kael Morrow, registered owner of a Harkin-class light freighter, known associate of Rosk, a Thin who left controlled space under circumstances the Trade Council considers irregular. Previous involvement in combined operations at Varath Minor, Korath's Reach, Ven's Hollow, and Pellin's Anchorage. The pattern is comprehensive. The pattern is a target list, and it doesn't stop at us. I turn to face him fully. Neela, Kez, Dav, everyone on the Crucible who's part of Lynn's network. If the Combine is sweeping the platform, they're not just looking for whoever Martin Cade really is. They're looking for how the auction got compromised. And the answer to that question is a mechanic with an AM transmitter hidden in the maintenance bay. Rosk was quiet for 4 seconds. For Rosk, that was a speech. "What do you want to do?" he asked.
The investigation.
Sierra's call came 11 minutes after Lynn's burst. Encrypted channel, triple relayed, the standard protocol that had become as familiar as the Cinder's complaints. But her voice had an edge I'd only heard once before at Varath Minor, when she'd realized the Combine had her father's station under surveillance. "You've seen Lynn's alert. Hard to miss. What do you know?" "More than I want to. My sources inside the Combine's administrative layer, don't ask who, don't ask how, have confirmed that Voss Rennick initiated a retrospective security review of the Crucible auction 7 days ago. Standard post-event protocol, which they run on every major auction to check for leaks. 7 days ago, the burst just came through. Because the review only flagged your identity yesterday. They had to process security footage from 11 cameras across the platform, cross-reference against buyer credentials, and run biometric matching against known databases. That takes time, even for the Combine. And they matched me. They matched your face to 3 databases. Keter Freeport's docking registry. You fueled there 8 months ago. Your image is in their commercial records. Pellin's Anchorage visitor log. You were there during the jammer test. And the station's restored security system has you on file. And Varath Minor, the Combine's own intelligence files from the kidnapping operation. 3 matches, 3 separate incidents, all connected to operations that cost the Combine money or embarrassment. Rennick escalated to the Combine's security directorate. Routine protocol. Any compromised identity at a premium auction triggers a directorate review. The directorate assigned it. Assigned it to who? The pause was a full second. In Sierra's operational communication style, a full second was an essay. Davan Solke. The name sat in the cockpit like a third presence. Davan Solke, the fixer from Varath Minor, the man who had kidnapped Sierra, who had confronted us at Ven's Hollow, who had made it personally clear that Kael Morrow was a problem he intended to solve. Charming, deliberate, dangerous. And now he had confirmation of what he'd probably suspected since the jammer test at Pellin's Anchorage. "Solke," I said, and the word tasted like metal. He didn't just accept the assignment, Kael. He requested it, pulled the file from the directorate before they'd finished the distribution cycle. He's been building a dossier on you for months, Varath Minor, Korath's Reach, Pellin's anchorage, now the Crucible. You're not a security flag to him. You're a project. I'm flattered. Don't be. He's already dispatched a security team to the Crucible. Official cover is a maintenance audit, standard combined practice, checks the platform systems and docking infrastructure between events. The real objective is a full forensic sweep. They'll pull surveillance data, interview permanent staff, inspect every maintenance bay, storage compartment, and communications array on the platform. When? They left Belkani dock 14 hours ago. Transit time to the Thresh Belt is approximately 58 hours from Belkani. That gives anyone on the Crucible roughly 44 hours. 44 hours, less than 2 days before the combined security team arrived at a platform where Neelat Singh had an AM transmitter hidden behind an atmospheric processor, where Kez Alvarado had a memory full of buyer faces cross-referenced against public registries, where Dav Patel had drive signatures and hull configurations logged in a notebook he kept in his toolbox. Sierra, the network people on the Crucible, Neela, Kez, Dav, the 9 who ran the intelligence operation during the auction. Are they still there? Most of them rotated out after the auction. Standard practice, Lin's protocol, is that network members on temporary platforms cycle within a week, but 3 are permanent Crucible staff. Neelat Singh, Kez Alvarado, Dav Patel. They live there. They can't just cycle out without raising exactly the kind of questions the Combine is coming to ask. Rosk observed Kael's face in the moments after Sierra's transmission ended. The display of emotions was not subtle. Kael's face was never subtle, a fact that made his success as an undercover operative at the Crucible auction something between remarkable and miraculous. Fear. Calculation. The particular tightening around the eyes that meant Kael was running scenarios, testing escape routes, measuring distances between where they were and where they could disappear. This was the hauler's instinct, the survival response that had kept Kael alive through years of bad decisions in dangerous places. When the name burns, you run. We need to change course, Kael said. Dump the Keter freight at the next way station, pick up a transit alias and head for the outer systems. Far Wheel maybe, or beyond there are stations past the mapped lanes where the Combine doesn't operate. No, Kael looked at him. No, we cannot leave. Rosk, my cover is blown. Salk is coming. Running is what the Cinder was built for, small, fast, capable of disappearing into freight traffic. We go quiet, change registration codes, let Sierra handle the political side. And Neelat Singh. The name stopped Kael's mouth the way a wall stops a ship. A sudden, complete arrest of momentum. Neela is permanent staff on the Crucible. Rosk continued, his voice level, the tone he used when precision mattered more than comfort. She has an AM transmitter concealed in the maintenance bay. If the Combine's forensic team inspects that bay, and they will inspect every bay because that is the purpose of a forensic sweep, they will find it. The transmitter's components are identifiable. The frequency is traceable. And Neelat Singh will be connected to an intelligence operation that compromised a premium auction. Lin's protocol. Lin's protocol covers communication security, 48 hours of silence, but the transmitter is physical evidence. It exists in a maintenance bay on a platform that the Combine is about to search. Silence does not make hardware invisible. Kael was quiet. The Cinder hummed around them, the engine's steady vibration, the periodic wheeze of the recycler, the faint creak of the pilot's chair on its shims. The sounds of a ship that had survived everything its owner had put it through, held together by replacement parts and refusal. Kez and Dav, Kael said. Yep. His voice had changed, quieter, the sardonic edge replaced by something rower. They're there too. Kez has buyer identifications memorized. Dav has drive signature logs. If the Combine interrogates permanent staff, they will interrogate permanent staff. It is standard procedure for a security audit, and Salk will not limit himself to standard procedure. He will be thorough because this is personal for him. You represent a pattern of interference that has cost the Combine operational security at multiple events. So we're not just burned. We're the match that lights the fire under everyone we worked with. Yes. Kael stared at the viewport. Keter-free ports, bright and indifferent. A destination that no longer mattered. If we go back to the Crucible, Kael said slowly, we're flying into the Thresh Belt again, to a platform where the Combine has already increased security to extract people we met once, while Davan Solke is actively hunting us. That's the plan. That is the obligation. Obligation. You built something at the Crucible, Kael. Not intentionally, you rarely do anything intentionally, but you built it. You went to a platform full of strangers, and 9 of them risked their lives because they believed in what Lynn's network represents. They listened on the frequency. They documented the auction. They transmitted when it mattered. And they did it because someone you showed up and proved that the information would be used. Rosk paused, 4 seconds. You do not build a thing like that and then abandon the people who believed in it. The water recycler wheezed. Kael closed his eyes. Set course for the Thresh Belt, he said.
The approach.
The Thresh Belt had not changed in 2 weeks. This was the nature of asteroid fields. They operated on geological timescales, indifferent to the urgencies of the small creatures who flew through them. The mineral clusters still scattered sensors. The iron-heavy masses still created false returns. The tumbling silicate formations still carved corridors that opened and closed with the slow patience of stone. What had changed was the traffic. Rosk detected 4 vessels at the belt's perimeter before entering the scatter zone. 2 were Combine-registered patrol ships, light corvettes with sensor arrays optimized for tracking small craft in debris fields. 1 was a commercial freighter on a legitimate mining run, its transponder broadcasting standard identification codes. The 4th was running dark, no transponder, minimal emissions, the kind of ship that existed in the spaces between legal categories. 2 patrols, Kael said, studying the sensor display from the co-pilot's position. That's new. There were none when we came for the auction. The auction was designed to attract visitors. The current objective is to discourage them. The Combine has established a security perimeter. Can we get through? Not on the mapped route. The patrol ships are positioned to cover the primary approach vector. Any vessel using the standard lane will be identified and queried. And the unmapped routes? The unmapped routes are unmapped for a reason. The mineral density increases significantly beyond the standard corridors. Sensor scatter approaches total. Even my vibration sensitivity will be operating at its functional limit. Kael was quiet for 3 seconds. You're saying it's dangerous. I am saying the attrition rate for small craft on mapped routes is 17%. The unmapped routes have not been measured because insufficient craft have survived them to generate meaningful data. So, more than 17%. Considerably. The Cinder entered the belt on a vector that no navigation database contained. Rosk flew by vibration, his hands on the manual controls, his skin reading the hull's transmitted frequencies, parsing the gravitational signatures of approaching masses with the processing speed of a nervous system evolved for exactly this purpose. The asteroid field closed around them. Through the viewport, the universe became a moving architecture of stone and iron, masses the size of buildings tumbling in slow rotation, creating gaps that appeared and disappeared with the regularity of breathing. The cinder's sensors showed static. The navigation display showed nothing useful. The proximity alarms had been disabled because they would have been screaming continuously, and continuous screaming helped no one. 8 degrees port, 4 ventral, Rosk said. Iron cluster, 300 meters closing. Kael watched the viewport. I can see it. You can see its shadow. The cluster itself is 70 meters beyond the visible mass. The shadow is cast by reflected light from Rosk. I trust you. Fly. Rosk flew. The cinder slid through a gap between two rotating silicate formations with less than 40 meters of clearance on either side. The hull groaned not from impact, but from the gravitational shear of passing between two dense masses in close proximity. The pilot's chair creaked on its shims. The viewport's hairline crack caught the light from a mineral deposit that glowed faintly with trapped radioactive decay. Beautiful, Kael said, in the tone of someone who meant it despite everything. Lethal, Rosk said, in the tone of someone who agreed with both assessments. The problem, I said, studying the Crucible schematic on a tablet Sierra had loaded with technical data, is that we can't dock at the main hub. The Combine will have the primary docking arms monitored, visual identification, transponder logging, probably manual inspection of incoming vessels. Correct. The maintenance arms on the lower platform are an alternative. They were designed for service vessels, small craft performing external repairs and supply deliveries. Less monitoring, direct access to the maintenance levels. Where Neela works, and where the AM transmitter is concealed. I scrolled through the schematic. The Crucible was a large platform, multiple levels, connected by cargo lifts and service corridors. The maintenance section occupied the lower third, separated from the habitation and commercial levels by bulkhead doors that required crew credentials. If we dock at a maintenance arm, we can access Neela's section without passing through the main platform. But we need to get a message to her first. If she doesn't know we're coming, she might not be at her post. Or worse, she might react visibly when she sees us, and if anyone's watching. The AM frequency is silent. Lynn's 48-hour protocol. Right. No M. Can we use the Cinder's short-range comms? Short-range communications within the Thresh belt are unreliable. The mineral scatter affects all standard frequencies. We could broadcast, but the signal would be degraded and potentially detectable by the Combine's patrol ships. I rubbed my eyes. The Cinder hummed. The recycler wheezed. So we show up unannounced at a platform that's on security alert, dock at a service arm that may or may not be monitored, walk into a maintenance section where our contact may or may not be present, and hope nobody notices. That is an accurate summary. I miss the days when our plans had more steps. Our plans have never had more steps. You consistently describe complex situations in ways that make them sound simpler than they are, and then express surprise when the simplicity proves inadequate. There is a secondary consideration, Rosk said, after a silence that lasted through 2 asteroid clearances and 1 wheeze from the recycler. Just one. Neela may not want to leave. I looked at him. The Combine is about to forensically sweep the platform where she's hiding an illegal transmitter. Why wouldn't she want to leave? Because the Crucible is her post. She has been there for 2 years. She maintains the atmosphere systems, the water recycling, the thermal regulators. The platform functions because she ensures it functions. For some people, the place they maintain is not merely a location. It is an identity. An identity that's about to get her interrogated by Davan Solke's security team. Yes, which is why the decision must be hers. We present the information, we offer extraction, and we respect her choice. The same applies to Kez and Dav. We cannot make this decision for them. I wanted to argue. The words were there, practical, logical, rooted in the undeniable truth that staying on the Crucible with a combined forensic team incoming was objectively, measurably dangerous. But I'd seen Rosk argue with the same precision about leaving thin space, about the importance of choosing your own ground even when that ground was shifting under your feet. Fine. We present the situation, we give them the choice, but we destroy that transmitter either way, Neela's agreement or not. That hardware is a smoking gun that connects her to the network, and I'm not leaving it for Salk to find. Agreed. The transmitter is evidence. The person is a choice. The cinder slid through another gap. The Crucible was 3 hours away.
The Crucible revisited.
The Crucible resolved from the belt's mineral haze like a memory emerging from static. The same angular silhouette, the same industrial bulk, the same docking arms extending from the central hub. But the details had changed. Rosk cataloged the differences as the cinder approached from the shadow of a carbonaceous asteroid the size of a small moon. 3 ships docked at the main hub, 1 combined registered corvette, 1 unmarked transport, and a service vessel with maintenance markings. No buyers' ships, no Makari traders, no dressy couriers. The auction was over and the Crucible had returned to its dormant state except for the corvette, which meant the Combine's presence was already established. The corvette is a Harkin-class security vessel, Rosk said. 4 crew minimum, 8 maximum. Sensor suite is active wideband scanning focused on the standard approach vectors. The maintenance arms. Lower platform, opposite side from the main hub. The Crucible's own structure provides sensor occlusion. If we maintain the asteroid's shadow until final approach and switch to manual thruster control within 500 meters, the corvette's sensors should not detect us. Should. The probability is acceptable. What's acceptable? Higher than the Thresh belt attrition rate. That's not as comforting as you think it is. Rosk guided the cinder into the asteroid's shadow, cutting the main drive and switching to maneuvering thrusters. The ship drifted, silent, minimal emissions, a dark shape against a darker background. The Crucible grew in the viewport, its lower platform emerging from behind the curve of the central hub. The maintenance arms were smaller than the main docking facility, designed for service pods and supply shuttles, not freight vessels. The cinder was barely within tolerance. Rosk aligned the approach with the care of someone threading a needle in variable gravity, compensating for the cinder's persistent leftward drift with micro-adjustments that bordered on art. The clamps engaged. Quietly. No grinding this time. The maintenance arms were better maintained than the main hub because the maintenance crew maintained what they used. "We are docked," Rosk said. "No alert signals detected. The corvette's sensor sweep has not altered pattern." "Then we're in." "We are in. The question is whether we can get out." The maintenance levels smelled the same. Mineral dust, recycled air, the ghost of industrial processes that had been silent for 40 years. The overhead light strips buzzed at the same frequency. The corridors were the same width, built for dressy cargo haulers, oversized for humans, which meant there was nowhere to hide. But there were cameras now, 3 in the first 50 meters, small, recently installed, the kind of commercial security units that stored footage locally and transmitted on scheduled intervals. They hadn't been here during the auction. Someone had added them in the last 2 weeks. New hardware, I murmured to Rosk, who was walking behind me with the carefully measured stride of someone trying to make 7 feet of thin look inconspicuous in a corridor with full surveillance coverage. Combined standard security cameras, local storage with periodic burst transmission, If we are recorded, the footage will be reviewed when the security team arrives. So we need to not be recorded. The cameras have fixed fields of view. The corridor junctions provide blind spots. The installers position them for maximum linear coverage, not intersection coverage. If we move through the junctions at appropriate angles, you've been counting them. I count everything. It is a habit. We moved through the maintenance section like people who belonged there, which was the only effective disguise in a place with cameras. Walk with purpose. Carry something. Don't look up at the surveillance. Rosk had grabbed a maintenance toolkit from a storage locker near the docking arm, unlocked, because maintenance lockers on working platforms were always unlocked, since the alternative was engineers wasting time with access codes when something was on fire. I carried a filtration element I'd found in the same locker. It was heavy and industrial, and made me look like someone doing a job, which was the closest thing to invisibility that existed in a working environment. The Combine's presence wasn't just cameras. A notice had been posted on the bulkhead at the junction between the maintenance corridor and the atmospheric processing section. A formal document, Combine letterhead, the kind of bureaucratic marking that turned a working platform into a controlled space. Combined Security Directorate Maintenance Audit. Authority reference CSA 7741. All permanent and temporary personnel are required to register with the audit coordinator within 48 hours of this notice. Unregistered personnel will be subject to identity verification, and interview cooperation is appreciated. And expected cooperation is appreciated and expected. I read aloud. That's the most threatening way I've ever seen someone say please. The notice was posted recently. The adhesive is fresh, less than 48 hours. The security team has not yet arrived, but they have established administrative authority remotely. Pre-sweep softening, make everyone nervous, see who runs. It is an effective technique. It's working. I'm nervous. We turned the corner into the atmospheric processing section. The corridor opened into a larger space, high ceiling, exposed ductwork. The mechanical hum of air handlers and thermal regulators doing the invisible work that kept everyone on the platform breathing. Equipment racks lined the walls. Tool stations occupied alcoves. And at the far end, with her back to us, hands deep in the access panel of an atmospheric processor, Neelat sang.
The choice.
She didn't turn around when we entered. Didn't react to the sound of our footsteps in the processing bay. She was deep in the atmospheric processor's access panel, her hands working with the precision of someone who serviced these units the way other people breathed, automatically, constantly, without conscious thought. Neela, I said. She pulled her hands out of the access panel, wiped them on her jumpsuit, and turned around. Her eyes found mine, and I saw the moment of recognition, not surprise, not fear, but a calm acknowledgement, like a mechanic noting that a part she'd ordered had arrived on schedule. Martin Cade, she said, then. Or is it the other name now? The other name, Kael Morrow, it's been a development. I heard. Lynn's burst came through before the silence protocol. She looked past me to Rosk, standing in the doorway with the maintenance toolkit, his amber eyes scanning the processing bay with the thorough attention of someone mapping escape routes. The big one came back too. Good. I've been meaning to ask him something. Rosk tilted his head. Ask. The vibration thing, can you feel the pressure differential in the number 3 thermal regulator from here? Because the sensors say it's fine and I say it isn't, and I'd like a second opinion from someone who can feel what instruments can't measure. Rosk was still for a moment. Then he placed his hand flat against the wall. 2 seconds. Number 3 regulator. The pressure differential is approximately 4% above nominal. The sensor is calibrated to flag at 5%. You are correct, it is not fine. It is approaching not fine. I knew it. She pulled a tool from her belt and made a note on a maintenance tablet. I've been telling the platform manager for 6 days. 4% is an emergency, but 4% becomes 5% becomes a thermal cascade if you ignore it long enough. She looked back at me. You didn't come here to help me fix a regulator. No. You came here because my name is on the same list yours is. Because the Combine is sweeping the platform, and I have hardware in this bay that shouldn't be here, and a security team is going to find it. 44 hours, I said. That's what our intelligence says. Combined security team from Belkani Dock, 58-hour transit, departed 14 hours ago. 41 hours now, Neela corrected. I've been counting since the burst, and it's closer to 38 if they push the transit speed, which they will if Solke is running it. She knew about Solke. Of course she did. Lynn's network shared information, and the name Davan Solke had been circulating since Varath Minor. Neela walked to a storage cabinet along the back wall of the processing bay. She opened it and pulled out a canvas bag, heavy, packed with components. The transmitter, she said. Disassembled it 6 hours after Lynn's burst. The main coil, the frequency modulator, the power coupling, all of it. I've wiped it for prints, scrubbed the solder joints for DNA residue, and separated the components into groups that individually look like standard maintenance parts. I stared at the bag. You all ready? I've had 2 years on this platform, Kael. 2 years of knowing that this day would come eventually. The Combine doesn't lose control of information without looking for the source. The moment we broadcast from that bay during the auction, I started planning for the day someone would come looking. She set the bag on a workbench. The question isn't the transmitter. The question is what happens next. We're offering extraction. The Cinder is docked at Maintenance Arm 6. We can get you off the platform before the security team arrives. And go where? Anywhere that isn't here. Pellin's anchorage, Lynn's base, or further out. Sierra has safe locations for network members who need to relocate. Neela looked at me with the expression of someone weighing options they'd already weighed 100 times. I've been on the Crucible for 2 years. I maintain the atmosphere for everyone on this platform. 400 people, give or take, depending on the event cycle. When I leave, someone else takes over, and that someone else might not notice the 4% differential on regulator 3 until it becomes a thermal cascade. Or they might not notice the microfracture in the secondary air handler's intake manifold, or the corrosion pattern in junction 7's humidity sensor that I've been compensating for manually because the replacement part has been on backorder for 9 months. Neela, I'm not saying no. I'm saying this place doesn't just lose a mechanic when I leave. It loses the person who knows where the hidden failures are. And 400 people keep breathing because someone knows. Kez Alvarado met them in the service corridor between the maintenance section and the habitation level. She came down the corridor with the unhurried stride of someone taking a break between shifts, a bartender getting air. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. She carried a mug that steamed gently, and her expression was the calm of a woman who had already made her decision. "Rosk," she said, nodding at the thin with the easy familiarity of someone who remembered serving him a drink 3 weeks ago and cataloging his face as a friendly contact. She looked at Kael. "You look different without the cover identity." "I look worse. The cover identity had better credentials. You look like yourself. That's worse for different reasons." She leaned against the corridor wall, sipping from the mug. "Lynn's burst. I got it. I know what's coming." Rosk spoke. "We are offering extraction to anyone whose exposure I'm staying." The words were level, decided, complete. No qualification, no hedging. My cover is solid, Kez continued. I'm a bartender. I pour drinks, I make small talk, I remember faces. That's my job description, not evidence of espionage. Everything I documented during the auction is in my head, not on a device. There's no hardware to find, no files to decrypt, no transmitter to trace. If the Combine interviews me, I'm a bartender who served drinks during an event and didn't notice anything unusual. My background check is clean. I left Belcani 3 years ago after a systems engineering contract ended. Moved into hospitality. It's not suspicious because it's true. The Combine may employ more invasive interrogation techniques than a standard interview, Rosk said. They might. But I've been interrogated before by immigration services, by customs officials, by one particularly persistent ex-boyfriend who wanted to know why his communication logs showed encrypted traffic to Keter. I'm good at being boring under pressure. It's a skill. Dav Patel was in the docking bay doing inventory. He was always doing inventory. It was both his job and his cover, the perfect alignment of duty and disguise. A dock worker who logged vessel information was doing exactly what dock workers did. The fact that he logged more thoroughly than most and transmitted his logs via AM to a maintenance engineer at a station 3 systems away was a detail hidden in plain sight. He was older than Rosk had expected, mid-60s perhaps, with the weathered hands and patient eyes of someone who had spent decades in merchant marine service before retiring to a platform in an asteroid belt. His hair was steel gray, close-cropped, and his posture had the straight-backed quality of someone who had served on ships where posture was the first thing inspected and the last thing forgotten. I appreciate you coming back, Dav said, and the words were simple and genuine and carried the weight of someone who understood what the trip through the Thresh belt cost. But I'm not leaving. Kael started to speak. Rosk placed a hand on his arm lightly, a gesture that meant, let him finish. I've been a dock worker for 4 years. Before that, merchant marine for 27. I've logged every ship that's docked at this platform since I arrived, drive signatures, hull configurations, crew manifests, cargo declarations. That's my job. That's what dock workers do. The fact that I also transmit those logs to people who use the information to protect the corridor is, well, it's what I chose. But the logs themselves are legitimate. They're in the platform's official records because I filed them there. A dock worker who keeps good records is an asset, not a suspect. And the notebook? Kael asked. Dav smiled. What notebook? The one you kept in your toolbox during the auction. I don't recall a notebook. I recall doing my job during a commercial event on the platform, logging vessel data as required by my employment terms and filing those logs with the platform administration. If I kept personal notes, well, old merchant marines are sentimental about ship specifications. It's not a crime. It's not a crime, Rosk agreed, but the Combine may not observe that distinction. The Combine can observe whatever it likes. I'm 63 years old, I've survived decompression events and pirate interdictions and a messy divorce, and I'm not being chased off my platform by a security audit. He straightened, and for a moment the retired dock worker was a merchant marine officer again, standing on the deck of his ship. Tell Lynn the Crucible node stays operational. I'll build a new transmitter when the heat dies down. Dav Patel doesn't abandon his post.
The evidence.
The waste heat furnace occupied an alcove at the back of the atmospheric processing bay. It was designed for biological waste and damaged filtration elements, the detritus of life support, the parts that couldn't be recycled and had to be reduced to ash. The temperature inside ran at 900 degrees during a cycle, which was more than enough to destroy electronics, copper coil, and the particular arrangement of components that Lynn Cortez had turned into an intelligence asset. Neela laid the transmitter components out on the workbench. Disassembled, they looked like what they were, parts. A copper coil wound around a ceramic former, a frequency modulator built from a modified radio kit, a power coupling adapted from a water pump motor, an antenna made from salvaged hull conduit. Each piece was individually innocuous. Maintenance parts, repair salvage, the kind of components that any mechanic might have in their workspace. Together, tuned to 47, 3 megahertz, they were a voice in the dark. Lynn gave me the kit 14 months ago, Neela said, handling the copper coil with the careful attention of someone saying goodbye. Came in a supply crate marked as atmospheric sensor replacements. The instructions were handwritten, Lynn's handwriting, which is terrible, like an engineer who learned to write from reading circuit diagrams. It took me 3 days to build, 14 months to use, and 40 seconds to change the corridor, I said. 40 seconds, that's how long the burst was. 40 seconds of encoded signal containing the full auction catalog, every lot, every price, every buyer identification that Kez could provide, every drive signature Dav had logged. 14 months of waiting for a 40-second window. She picked up the frequency modulator, turned it over in her hands. It's not the hardware that matters, she said. It's the frequency. The hardware is replaceable. Lynn can build another kit in an afternoon. The frequency, 47.3 megahertz, that's the thing they can't destroy because it's not a device. It's an idea, and ideas don't burn. She fed the modulator into the furnace. The metal glowed and then was gone. The copper coil went next. Then the power coupling. Then the antenna, the last piece, the part that had actually transmitted the signal, that had turned electrical impulses into radio waves that had crossed the thresh belt and reached a relay station and eventually found their way to Sierra's intelligence team. Neela held the antenna for a moment longer than the other pieces. It was a simple thing, a meter of salvaged conduit, straightened and tuned. Not elegant, not sophisticated, effective. Goodbye, she said, not to me, not to anyone in the room. The furnace cycled. 900 degrees, the antenna ceased to exist. Done, Neela said. Her voice was steady, her hands were steady. But her eyes, for just a moment, were the eyes of someone who had burned something they'd built with their own hands and felt the particular grief that only builders understand. Neela, I said, the offer stands. The cinder is at maintenance arm 6. She looked at me, then at Rosk, then at the furnace, where the ash of 47.3 megahertz was cooling. I've been thinking about what you said, about the network needing me mobile, about Lynn building more kits and more stations needing engineers who know how to assemble them and train others. I didn't say that. Rosk did, with his eyes. He does that, communicates entire arguments by looking at you with those amber eyes and waiting for you to catch up. I glanced at Rosk. He said nothing. His amber eyes were, in fact, communicating something. I chose not to examine what. 400 people breathe because I maintain the atmosphere on this platform, Neela said. But 400 is one platform. Lynn's network covers 22 stations. If I stay here, I maintain one system. If I leave, I can build 20. That's not why you should leave. No, I should leave because the Combine is sending Davan Solke's security team to a platform where I've been running intelligence operations for 14 months, and even with the transmitter destroyed, the risk of exposure is. Also not why. She stopped, looked at me again sharper. Then why? Because you deserve to choose where you work, and this place just became somewhere you'd be staying out of fear. You're a mechanic, Neela. You fix things. Go somewhere you can fix things because you want to, not because you're too scared to leave. The silence lasted 5 seconds. Neela Tseng was not a woman given to long silences. "Pack time," she said. "I need 15 minutes.
The departure.
Neela packed the way she did everything, with the efficient precision of someone who had inventoried every object in her life and knew exactly what mattered. A tool roll, personal rather than standard issue, with wrenches and calibration instruments that bore the wear marks of years of use. A change of clothes, a data chip that she slipped into her boot. And I didn't ask what was on it because some habits were universal, and boots were apparently the courier's safety deposit box of choice. A small frame with a photo, 2 women standing in front of a station viewport, one of them Nyla, the other someone she didn't name. "That's it," she said. "4 minutes, not 15. You pack light. I'm a mechanic. Everything I need I can build. Everything I can't build isn't worth carrying." We moved through the maintenance corridors toward Arm 6. Neela walked with the authority of someone who belonged, because she did belong, had belonged for 2 years, and the fact that she was leaving didn't erase the patterns of movement and confidence that came from knowing every junction, every shortcut, every camera angle in her domain. "Camera 3 is on a 40-second cycle," she murmured as we passed a junction. "Blind spot in 12 seconds. We waited. Moved. The corridor was empty, maintenance shift turnover. Neela explained, the 20-minute gap between the day and night crews when the maintenance levels were briefly unoccupied. She timed our departure for exactly this window. "You planned this." "I've been planning this since the auction. The day crew ends at 1800, the night crew starts at 1820. 20-minute gap. The cameras record, but nobody watches the feeds in real time. They are stored and reviewed later. By the time anyone reviews today's footage, we need to be in the belt." The Cinder detached from Maintenance Arm 6 with the minimal emission protocol Rosk had developed during their approach, cold thrusters, no main drive, drifting on the residual momentum of the undocking sequence. The ship moved like a held breath, sliding away from the Crucible's lower platform into the mineral shadow of the nearest asteroid cluster. Rosk's hands were on the manual controls. His skin read the hull. Through the vibration, he could feel 2 things: the belt's familiar gravitational architecture and something new, the regular, pulsing signature of a ship running active sensors. "The Corvette has entered the belt," Rosk said. "Active sweep pattern, wide-band sensor emissions, 60-second cycle. Current bearing places it approximately 3 kilometers from our position on the far side of the primary cluster." "Is it looking for us?" Kael asked from the co-pilot's seat. "It is looking for everything. Standard patrol sweep, not targeted but comprehensive. Any vessel within its sensor envelope will be detected and queried." And its sensor envelope, approximately 800 meters in this mineral density. The scatter reduces their effective range significantly, but they compensate by running a slow, systematic pattern. Neela was strapped into the cargo bay's emergency seat, a fold-down unit designed for service crews, not passengers, with restraints that assumed the occupant might be holding tools during turbulence. She had secured her tool roll under the seat and was monitoring a tablet she'd connected to the Cinder's secondary sensor feed. "The Corvette is running a Tessian sweep pattern," Neela said. Her voice came through the intercom from the cargo bay, calm and analytical. "Standard combined security protocol. I've seen it before when they do post-event security checks. They start from the platform and spiral outward, covering progressively wider arcs. Predictable. The gap between sweep arcs is approximately 600 meters at this range. Can we fit through the gap?" "The Cinder can. Barely. but you'd need to time the movement to match the sweep cycle, move during the 60-second sensor pulse, stop during the gap, move again on the next cycle. The mineral scatter will cover your drive signature if you keep thrust below, she paused, calculating. Below 12%. 12% thrust through the Thresh Belt's unmapped routes, Kael said. That's slow. That's alive, Neela said. Rosk flew. Not with speed, speed was the enemy now, but with the particular patience of a Then who could feel the universe through the hull and read its intentions in the vibration of iron and stone. The corvette's sensor pulse swept past them, a wave of electromagnetic energy that scattered against the mineral field and returned garbled data to the patrol ship's sensors. The Cinder, powered down to 12% thrust, nestled in the shadow of a silicate formation, was noise within noise. Invisible. For 60 seconds. Pulse passed, Neela reported. Next sweep in 60 seconds, you have a window. Rosk engaged thrusters. The Cinder slid forward, threading between two mineral clusters with the delicacy of something much smaller than a Harkin-class freighter. The gap was narrow, 40 meters, barely twice the ship's beam, and the mineral walls on either side were dense enough to create gravitational eddies that tugged at the hull. The Cinder pulled left. Always left. The persistent drift that was written into the ship's bones, the asymmetry that no repair could fully correct. In the gap between mineral walls, that drift could be the difference between clearance and contact. Ross compensated. His hands moved on the controls, not the calculated adjustments of an instrument pilot, but the intuitive corrections of someone whose body was part of the ship, whose skin felt what the sensors could not see. The Cinder straightened, passed through the gap, emerged into a wider corridor of open space between clusters. 30 seconds, Neela said. Ross cut thrust. The Cinder drifted silent, dark, a stone among stones. The next sensor pulse swept through the corridor. The electromagnetic wave washed over the Cinder's hull. Rosk felt it as a faint tingle, a vibration at the frequency of searching, and passed. The corvette's sweep continued, spiraling outward, moving away from their position. Pulse passed. Next window, 60 seconds. The corvette is moving to the outer arc. The gap between sweeps is widening. We're through the tight zone, Kael said. How much further to the belt's edge? At 12% thrust, 47 minutes. 47 minutes of this. 47 minutes of being alive, Neela said. Beats the alternative. Kael looked at Rosk. Rosk looked at the viewport, where the belt's mineral architecture created a landscape of shadow and stone that stretched to the edge of sight. Beautiful, lethal, indifferent. 47 minutes, Kael said. I've had worse dates. You have had exclusively worse dates, Rosk said, and engaged thrusters for the next window.
The frequency that carries.
Clear space. The belt behind us, the Cinder's main drive engaged. The stars visible through the viewport like something the universe had been saving for people who survived the Thresh Belt twice in 3 weeks. The water recycler wheezed. The Cinder pulled left. The pilot's chair creaked on its shims. All the small, persistent complaints of a ship that survived by refusing to acknowledge its own deterioration. Neela was asleep in the cargo bay. She'd fallen asleep within minutes of clearing the belt, not the sleep of exhaustion, but the sleep of someone who had been running on adrenaline and preparation for 2 weeks and could finally, briefly, stop. Rosk had draped a thermal blanket over her without being asked, because that was the kind of thing Rosk did when he thought no one was watching. I called Sierra. You're out. No preamble. Sierra had stopped using preambles somewhere around the 3rd crisis. We're out. Neela's with us. The transmitter is ash. Kez and Dav are staying, covers solid, no physical evidence. Good, that's a breath. Relief packaged in a single exhale. That's good, Kael. What's the damage? To the network, minimal. 1 transmitter destroyed, 1 operator relocated. Lynn is already preparing a replacement kit. The Crucible node will be dormant until the heat dies down, but Kez and Dav can rebuild when it's safe. And to us, the pause was longer than a breath. Rennick's facial recognition report has been distributed to the Combined Security Directorate. Your real name, your real face, the Cinder's registration, Rosk's identification as a thin national with irregular departure status. They've connected you to Verath Minor, Korath's Reach, Pellin's Anchorage, and now the Crucible. 4 operations, 4 incidents that cost the Combined money, access, or intelligence. So the cover game is over. The cover game is over. You can't use aliases at any Combined monitored facility. Your face is in their database. Any station with Combined security presence will flag you on arrival. I looked at the viewport. Stars. The kind of vast, indifferent beauty that made human problems feel appropriately small. How many stations have Combined security presence? Active presence in 14 systems. Monitoring agreements with stations in another 9. Total coverage, approximately 40% of the corridor's major facilities. So 40% of the corridor just became hostile territory. Yes, Kael. Sierra's voice changed, not the intelligence operative, not the coalition builder. Something closer to the woman who had punched him at Verath Minor and then trusted him to save her life. Solke is building something, not just a file, a case. He's connecting every operation, building a pattern of interference that he can present to the Combined's Executive Council as evidence of coordinated opposition. You're not just a hauler who was in the wrong place. In Solke's narrative, you're the operational arm of whatever this coalition is becoming. I'm a freight hauler who can't keep his mouth shut. You're a freight hauler who infiltrated a sealed bid weapons auction, documented the entire catalog, enabled a broadcast that exposed the Combined's jammer deployment business to multiple intelligence services, and then went back to extract a network operative from a platform that was about to be swept. That's not keeping your mouth open. That's building something. I'm not building anything. I'm flying a ship that pulls left and making decisions that are probably wrong and happening to be surrounded by people who are much better at this than I am. That's what building something looks like from the inside. The connection was quiet. The stars didn't move. The recycler wheezed. Be careful, Sierra said. Solke is patient. He doesn't rush. He builds his case and then he moves, and when he moves, it's with everything he has. I'll be careful. You'll be reckless and call it careful, but I'll take what I can get. Sierra, yes, thank you for all of it. The intelligence, the cover identity, the don't thank me, we're not done. This is the early middle, Kael. The Accord Station deployment is still coming. The Vedani bid is still active, and now the Combined knows our faces. I'm in this too. Solke's file has my name on it. The coalition I'm building isn't invisible, it never was. We just had more time than we thought, and now we have less. How much less? Enough, maybe, if the network holds and the engineers keep building and we don't stop doing what we've been doing. Flying into asteroid belts for people we barely know. That, yes, exactly that. Kael slept in the pilot's chair. He always slept in the pilot's chair, not because it was comfortable, which it emphatically was not, listing right on shims cut from a maintenance manual, but because the chair was the center of the cinder, the place from which every decision emanated, and Kael's relationship with his ship was not ownership but partnership, the kind that required physical proximity to feel real. Rosk sat in the co-pilot's seat, the good one, the one that didn't list and monitored the Cinder's course toward Pellin's Anchorage. 14 hours of transit. Neela asleep in the cargo bay, Kael asleep in the chair, and Rosk in the liminal space of thin light rest. Aware, processing, his skin reading the hull's vibrations with the passive attention of breathing. The AM receiver was silent, 47.3 megahertz, the frequency that had carried an auction catalog through an asteroid belt, that had connected 37 engineers across 22 stations, that had proven that a copper coil and a water pump motor could challenge the most sophisticated signal jamming technology in the corridor. Silent now. Lynn's protocol. 48 hours of quiet while the network assessed the damage, evaluated exposure, and prepared to continue. Not dismantled, not destroyed. Waiting. The way a frequency waits, existing whether anyone transmits on it or not, available to anyone with the knowledge and the courage to speak. One transmitter destroyed. One operator extracted. One cover identity burned. And the network was intact, not because it was strong, strength implied structure, hierarchy, the kind of centralized power that could be targeted and dismantled. The network survived because it was distributed, decentralized, held together by nothing more than a frequency and a shared understanding among people who fix things for a living. Rosk thought about what had happened in the last 30 hours. A coded burst on an obsolete frequency. A decision made in a cockpit that smelled like fertilizer. A flight through an asteroid belt. A mechanic who burned her own work to protect the idea behind it. A bartender who chose to stay because her cover was her courage. A dock worker who refused to leave his post because that was what merchant marines did. Humans. Rust. They got into everything, they never came out, and they changed whatever they touched. The Combine would find the Crucible clean. No transmitter, no encoded data, no physical evidence of the intelligence operation that had compromised their premium auction. Rennick would file a report. Solke would add it to his growing dossier on Kael and the pattern of interference that was costing the Combine more than money, costing them the assumption that their operations were invisible. They would hunt Kael. This was certain. Solke would be patient and thorough and dangerous, and the next confrontation would come on his terms, at his choosing, with the weight of the Combine's resources behind him. The 40% of the corridor that had Combined security presence was now 40% of the corridor where Kael could not safely dock. But the other 60% was still there. And in that 60%, and in the gaps within the 40, in the maintenance bays and docking platforms and service corridors that the Combine monitored but never truly controlled, 37 engineers listened on a dead frequency and waited to speak. Neela Tseng would reach Pellin's anchorage. She would meet Lynn Cortez. She would build more transmitters, train more engineers, extend the network into stations that didn't yet know the frequency existed. The Crucible had lost a node, but the network had gained something more valuable, a builder who could replicate herself. Kael stirred in his sleep. The chair creaked. The recycler wheezed 13 minutes and 42 seconds, as reliable as Rosk's internal count. The cinder pulled left and Rosk corrected, and the ship flew on through the stars toward a way station where an engineer was waiting to meet the mechanic who had burned her transmitter and walked away. The AM receiver was silent, but the frequency was there. 47.3 megahertz, too old to kill, too simple to jam, too human to forget. And somewhere in the corridor, in the spaces the Combine thought it controlled, the rust was spreading.
Thanks for listening. We post new stories daily. Hit subscribe to stay in the loop.